Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. It is race week for the season finale. Absolute chaos following the Qatar Grand Prix. Red Bull apologised to Kimi Antonelli for thousands of messages that he received after the drama at the end of yesterday's race, but also McLaren responding to Oscar Piastri after effectively throwing away his title bid, and Andrea Stella confirming though that they will not be changing their philosophy going to Abu Dhabi as they attempt to gift this title to Max Verstappen as well. Very much interested in your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. We've got a lot to talk about today. We are going to start here. Aston Martin, they've confirmed when next year's car will be revealed. Interestingly enough, it's going to be after the pre-season test. So there's a number of tests. There's a Barcelona test behind closed doors. Red Bull are going to reveal their car before then. Might not end up being the actual version they take to the track, but Aston Martin are going to run a car at the Barcelona test, and then they're going to properly do the reveal shortly afterwards before the Bahrain test, which of course are going to be publicly broadcast. That is Adrian Newey's first Aston Martin. The other update is on the driver lineup at Red Bull next year. So Eric Van Haren, very well connected at Red Bull, and especially with Max really, he has said for a while now Hadjar was getting that drive. Pretty much ever since he got the podium in Zandvoort, it was nailed on Hadjar was going to get the Red Bull seat. Van Haren says Lawson stays with Racing Bulls, Arvid Lindblad is his teammate, Tsunoda loses his seat, confirmation expected on Tuesday. Now, of course, he says confirmed in his tweet. It's not been confirmed, but I would say this is very likely to come true. Now, Hadjar will be going to Red Bull alongside Max. That is 99.9% guaranteed. The situation at Racing Bulls is a little less clear. Over the last few days, there have been reports that maybe Lawson will be joined by Lindblad. Maybe something else is going on. There are other people saying that maybe Tsunoda is going to stay, but at Racing Bulls instead. Maybe Lindblad won't even get the promotion. What's going on there? So there was a rumour that because Lindblad is going to have to do a lot of TPC testing, probably in Honda Power, they may choose that, and they would like to see Tsunoda stay in the sport. And if Red Bull have no reason to choose Lawson over Yuki and it's going to 50-50, that may weigh up their decision. It is my understanding that Lindblad has been informed he will be getting the Racing Bulls drive. And so I would be surprised if they've changed their mind on that. And we're expecting confirmation tomorrow. So they have made the decision. It just depends who you ask exactly what that decision is, because I doubt that they are still undecided if they're going to announce it tomorrow, because they said they would announce it before Abu Dhabi. They are set to do exactly that. Now, speaking of Red Bull, the main drama about them today and yesterday was actually this. So this is Kimi Antonelli, and last night he blacked out his profile picture because, well, presumably he wanted to spend a bit of time off social media. Mercedes actually said today that he received over 1,000 abusive messages that they are going to send on to the FIA because of this incident at the end of the race. Now, this is dramatic for a number of reasons. I think it's clear to anyone who has watched the onboards this was not intentional, and why would it ever be intentional? Antonelli was chasing, I mean, you can see Sainz right there. Yeah, all the talk was about will Lando get Antonelli for fourth because that was important, which he eventually did. But Antonelli was also fighting for a podium, right? Sainz had a bit of understeer induced in the car. He had good pace at that time. It looked like he had a chance to maybe catch and overtake Sainz. So Antonelli was also pushing hard himself. Mercedes are fighting to try and secure seconds in the Constructors' Championship, which they're almost certainly going to do, but it's still not a guarantee following this weekend's. So he's pushing hard for that as well. Yes, Lando is driving a Mercedes-powered car, but that doesn't make any difference to Mercedes. If anything, it's just more embarrassing if they, go on to lose both championships this year. And you can see here on the onboards, it's good to look at it from Antonelli's rear view here. Comes around, I think it's turn 9, and has a big wobble on the exit of the corner there. So big wobble, shakes up the rear tyres a little bit. They're now at a temperature window that isn't optimal. Then he goes into turn 10, and he has this absolutely real big lazy slide on the exit. Goes off the track when he's trying to put the power down. Lando goes through. So, yeah, it was a mistake. I don't think anyone can possibly look at that and say that it was deliberate. I mean, if it was deliberate, he would have not probably done it in this way. He would have made a mistake at the final couple of corners, and then Lando would have got through with DRS, which never happened. So it was pretty obvious. Now, there was a lot of drama, though, because this was critical for the championship for Max. It means that Lando is is 12 points ahead of Max rather than 10, and that means that he has to finish only third in Abu Dhabi, whereas it would have been seconds for sure if Max goes on to win the race. And that is a big difference at the end of the Grand Prix. Now, GP on the radio says, don't know what happened there, Max. Looks like Antonelli just pulled over and let him through. Now, I want to give GP a little bit of the benefit of the doubt here. He wasn't speaking to the public. He was speaking to Max on the radio. Should he have said it? Probably not, but, it's a heat of the moment thing. It is what it is. And it's not like he was watching this in real time anyway. Toto and GP actually had a bit of a chat we saw after the race. You can tell by Toto's face and his body language, he's not especially happy with what GP said. But Toto said to the media, look, we cleared it up. GP didn't really see it in real time. He knows that there was nothing in that. However, Helmut Marko, he had something slightly different to say. Now, we also know that Piastri passed Antonelli earlier on in the stint, which was also pretty critical for... It wouldn't have mattered anyway, really. He wasn't catching up to Max, but there was maybe a feeling that somehow Antonelli let him through easier than he should have done or something, whatever. There was a massive tyre offset at that point in the race on those relatively soft medium tyres. But Marko says he let him pass. It was really too obvious. He let McLaren pass twice, more or less. It was obvious. The first time was the same. So, again, now it wasn't just GP and Helmut Marko saying this. I wasn't obviously listening to the Latin American broadcast, but I did see some discussion that on certain broadcasts, they were going very hard on this idea that Antonelli had basically gifted the position to Lando for the championship points, which seems pretty nonsensical to me. Toto even came out and said it's total utter nonsense. Blows my mind to even hear that. How brainless can you be to even say something like this? Why would we even think about interfering in a driver's championship? You really need to check yourself. So that's what he said. Of course, Antonelli's also fighting for as many points as he can get, and as a result of this, he was getting clearly a ton of online abuse, to the extent, as it always goes, to the extent of death threats apparently that Antonelli has been receiving. Supposedly many of those have made their way to the FIA as well, even to the extent that Red Bull today put out an apology. You don't see this very often, but they did do it. Comments made before the ends, so GP on the radio, and immediately after the Qatar Grand Prix, so Helmut Marko, suggested that a Mercedes driver, Kimi Antonelli, had deliberately allowed Lando Norris to overtake him are clearly incorrect. Replay footage shows Antonelli momentarily losing control of his car, thus allowing Norris to pass him. It's, again, not the ideal wording, is it? Because, they've said allowing Norris to pass him. They probably could have chosen a slightly better choice of wording. But anyway, we sincerely regret that this has led to Kimi receiving online abuse. And that's all that they say. There was also a statement from the FIA, united against online abuse, right? And all this stuff. And they say they stand against all the abuse and all this. And yeah, criticise Marko, criticise GP. At the end of the day, they weren't the ones sending the hate messages to Antonelli. I'm not going to defend Marko, especially because I think what he said was pretty outrageous. Definitely contributed to this situation, so he deserves criticism for that. But also, the people who actually send these messages, those are also the true clowns of it, right? So it's not as simple as it's all Red Bull's fault. As far as I'm concerned, the people that actually have done this stuff should probably look at themselves in the mirror. Definitely should look at themselves in the mirror. Probably won't like what they see, to be honest. Helmut Marko then comes out and says, I looked at the footage again very carefully. The first time, and I also love how Helmut Marko, he will never fully back down. He is still on the idea of, Antonelli could have defended against Piastri harder, which, to be fair, is true. Obviously, it wasn't his race, so it wouldn't really have mattered. He could have defended harder against Piastri in that earlier stint. He could have taken the inside line. But yeah, he says Antonelli could have put up more of a fight. The second time it was driving error, not intentional. I'm sorry that Antonelli got so much hate online. To make it perfectly clear, he did not let Norris pass intentionally. So there you go. That is the Red Bull drama of the day. Just about 30 seconds on Ferrari because it was such a miserable weekend that Verstappen is now ahead of them in the points championship on his own. In a car that is not going to be winning the World Constructors' Championship this year, there was some question as to why Ferrari was so bad. I expected them to be pretty terrible this weekend, but they were genuinely, at least arguably, the worst car on the track this weekend. which was, yeah, shocking, right? And there may be something in it to do with the tyre pressures. We know that they raised the tyre pressures to protect the plank right at the end of the Hungarian Grand Prix, and Leclerc lost just so much pace. And in Qatar, because of the level of wear and all this, the tyre pressures mandated are very, very high. I think they're up to like 29 psi. They're usually down in the mid to lower 20s for PSI pressures on the tyres. So Pirelli mandated them very high, which seems to affect Ferrari more than most. Again, it's another like miraculous thing that just destroys the Ferrari. I mean, you put it in any type of condition, the lift and coast needs to be done for so many different reasons. You put it in the wet, it's terrible. You put it with higher tyre pressures, it's terrible. Like, what is the window? What is the window of Ferrari? Hamilton says, I've got a lot of notes on things we need to improve. Time will tell if we act accordingly and if we keep what is good and change what isn't. There's no reason we couldn't fix them if we just put them into practice. But of course, we understand that some internal Ferrari politics may have something to say about that. But the big drama going into Abu Dhabi, of course, is the Drivers' Championship as yet undecided. For the first time since 2010, we have a three-way fight going into the season finale. Lando is still the favourite, but the pressure is undisputedly on. And in the same way that Max had a difficult time getting over the line in 2021, I would expect similar for Lando this weekend. It was certainly the case this time around in Qatar as well. I do feel terrible though for Oscar Piastri, because he was finally, after a horrible run of about 4 months worth of form, but his good work before then and some, misfortune for Lando, I'd say, well, certainly in Zandvoort, meant that Piastri was still absolutely in the picture going into Qatar, a weekend where not only was he expected to bounce back, in my opinion anyway, based on the track and all that, but also he did bounce back in emphatic fashion. He was the driver of the weekend, I think undisputedly, really didn't put a foot wrong at all, drove like one of the best weekends that he ever has, and yet was only P2 at best behind Max because of the decision that the team decided to make. To such a degree, the Piastri's title chances now are very slim. He is 16 points behind Lando in the championship. That means that if Piastri wins in Abu Dhabi, Norris only has to be 5th, which, obviously he could finish lower than 5th, but it wouldn't be expected. The McLarens have basically always been in the conversation for the last few races, unless there's some sort of disqualification or crash or, untimely safety car or something. And even then, in Qatar, if they'd have pitted Lando and he was held because of the double stack, which he probably would have been, he would have come out behind a couple of cars and probably been unable to overtake, because it was Qatar, a weekend where a couple of years ago you actually could overtake. But with the dirty air moving in the way that it has and the cars being very similar in terms of performance, you needed such a big delta on the car in front to even try for an overtake. Lando probably would have been stuck. But if Lando is stuck in some traffic after something similar in Abu Dhabi, the overtaking should be more straightforward for him to move back through the field to where he needs to be. Lower than 5th and Piastri winning, it's very slim, right? We'll look at what the markets say in a second, but the markets have Piastri's chances at about 5-6% following this race, significantly lower than where Max's currently are. And Piastri was furious, and so was Mark Webber. Now, there was a very interesting video that Kim Illman did saying that he had seen Mark Webber with an icy stare, the way of Zak Brown. I also thought the way that Zak Brown handled it, so Zak came up to Oscar in the media pen, you don't see that very often, to hug him, commiserations and all, oh, sorry, Oscar, like we messed up big time, whatever. It's like, yeah, I don't know. McLaren really try this whole, oh, Oscar and Lando are best of friends. And I actually think they have a pretty good relationship between the pair of them. But I think that Oscar's relationship with the team is as bad as it's ever been. And, I've said this from at least halfway through the season, that I do not expect Piastri and Norris to stay as teammates for that long. They individually may be okay with one another, but the way that McLaren have gone about it, it's just never going to last, the way that they've done this, especially some of the decisions they've made. Look, we discussed it yesterday, why they made the decision that they did. I put a pinned comment as well, just to kind of clarify some of my thoughts on it. I think having looked back on it, pitting Piastri was an absolute no-brainer. Now, you might argue that they made a genuine mistake because they didn't have the information that everyone else is going to pit. But I think that's misleading, because Everyone knew that if there was a safety car from lap 7 and beyond, then given the mandated 2-stop and the 25-lap limit, that's where it was. And every competent team would have had that discussion the night before. McLaren were apparently surprised that everyone else boxed, but to me it was a no-brainer, right? Like, it's not even that this was a virtual safety car. This was a full safety car, so you literally got a free pit stop. It wasn't even that you got a reduced time in the pits from 25 down to 12, 13 seconds. You literally got a completely free stop, and you have to do 2 of them. So, yeah, I thought it was such a no-brainer that people would box. Obviously, Red Bull made the right decision with Max, as they almost always do. So leaving Oscar out was a terrible mistake, and even if you agree that it was just a mistake, then even then, having seen Max come in, they should have brought Lando in probably as well. Now, as I mentioned, the real way to have done this would have been to pit Oscar, for sure, no-brainer, keep him ahead of Max. Also, I mean, this is the other crazy thing to me. They literally said, oh, we've now got the flexibility and Max doesn't. Well, okay, if you pit Oscar in front of Max, then neither of them have any flexibility. So it's a guaranteed win, right? Like, it's brilliant. It's genius, right? Now, of course, if you were to pit Lando as well in that scenario, then he gets held for the double stack. They're the first pit box. He probably loses a couple of positions. He might be in P5, and then he has no flexibility, because he's now got to do 2 stints, no undercut attempt or anything for the rest of the Grand Prix. So, you know, I can see the argument that probably they should have boxed Oscar, obviously, because he would have gone on to win the Grand Prix, no questions. What they should have probably done then is leave Lando out, because if they left Lando out there, then he would have had track position. He can fly off into the distance with no need to worry about management on his tyres. Oscar can then do what Max eventually did, which is ease in those medium tyres for the 25-lap stint. Lando would then disappear into the distance. He would come out ahead of Alonso after the pit stops, and because he wasn't the second car on the road and he would have been the first car on the road in that scenario, he would be well placed, just like Oscar was, to successfully get past Sainz and Antonelli on the second round of stops, probably end up in third as well. So, look, in hindsight, I'm sure that they recognise this, but the reason why they didn't do it is because I don't think they want to split the strategies. It's the same with all the pit stop drama. McLaren don't want to split strategies because they feel like splitting strategies is always going to favour one driver over the other, which is like, yes, it will. One of the strategies you choose will be better. If Lando was left out, he would have been frustrated. If Oscar was, left out, as he was, then he's going to be frustrated. Doing the same for both is fine if you're a million miles ahead in the championship and it doesn't even matter. But in this scenario, it was just awful, right? Like, just a terrible decision. So I think that's the crux of the issue. They want to do the same thing with both drivers. They felt like if they did the same thing with Lando, then he would be disadvantaged. And some people will read that as to, well, they're trying to make Oscar lose the championship and Lando to win instead. I'm not going to comment on that any further, but these were the radio messages between the drivers. I mean, look, Lando knew, I think, that he needed to pit there, but look, McLaren admitted we made the wrong decision. I don't think anyone is denying that. Just before we discuss these responses actually from Stella, this is what Laura McKee says. Because he was asked, McLaren staying out, were you surprised? And he says, yeah, we were surprised. On our side, we had pre-decided that we will pit the first lap we can if there's a safety car. We will take it. Can't judge their thought process, but yes, we were very surprised. So, McLaren are just not a serious team. And to add fuel to the fire, Stella says this: the first element to focus on from a team point of view is to make sure that we are in condition, prepared, and determined to execute perfect race weekends. The pace has been in the car. The drivers are doing an exceptionally good job, but over the last couple of races, from a team point of view, we have not been in condition to capitalise on the good work of the drivers and the potential we have in the car. When it comes to the fact that we have 2 drivers in the quest for the World Championship, our philosophy and our approach will not change. We will leave both Oscar and Lando the possibility to compete and pursue their aspirations. This all comes back to that comment from Zach Brown when he said, we would rather lose to Max than we would favour one driver over the other. And it's like, well, you actually may get your wish there, Zach. So McLaren are clear. They're not going to change their approach. If there are similar strategic dilemmas in the final rounds, what are they going to do the same thing? That's my question, right? Because Piastri's chances now are slim, but they are still there. if there is a similar strategic dilemma with the safety car where probably they should leave Lando out or probably they should bring him in and split the strategies for whatever the situation on the track is, will they once again decide to do the same with both drivers and maybe open the door to Max? Who knows? But also, if, hypothetically, if they were to do that, they may well guarantee that Piastri can't win, and therefore it becomes more of a debate. It's like the way that they've handled things is just such an absolute mess. And I'm genuinely glad that we are seeing it blow up in their face to some degree. They may still win it, but they have been exposed as a fraudulent organisation this season, and there is no doubt about that, and Max is the one who has done most of that exposing, or arguably it is themselves that have preyed on their own downfall. So, Max has a 12-point deficit to Lando. If you run the odds through like a pure calculator and you say, randomize every position, what happens? Lando wins 83% of the time. But obviously that's not actually how it goes, right? Because it's unlikely that they're going to finish P18. So when you look at it from, well, this is what the market has to say. This is on Polymarket. We've looked at this throughout the season. It's actually crazy how things have changed throughout the year. This is what the market currently says. It believes that Lando has a 73% chance of winning this championship. Max's chances are 22% roughly, and Oscar fills up the rest of the gap. That is the way things currently look according to the markets. As I say, the last 2 times, at least since the turn of the century, that there have been 3 drivers all in contention at the final rounds, on both occasions, Raikkonen in 07 and Vettel in 2010, those drivers that won were 3rd in the championship. So, look, maybe it's not over yet for Oscar Piastri, but it is a challenge, right? The way that this looks is if Norris is 3rd, then he wins no matter what. And that, of course, also requires Max to win, which is also far from a guarantee, right? Like, we know that it's been a problem for Max, certainly last year, was not a great time for the Red Bull. I'm expecting Red Bull and Max to be right in the conversation this time around. Obviously, Max famously won here at the previous championship decider that we had in 2021, again, in massively controversial circumstances. So I don't expect this to be, to go quietly into the night, as it were. And McLaren, they're going to take the same approach. I guess my question really becomes, what do they do with team orders towards the end of the race if they are necessary? Let's say Max is winning, Oscar is 2nd or something, and Lando's down in 4th or even maybe 5th, and Piastri needs to do a job. Now, in that scenario, Piastri would still be able to win. Let's say Max crashed out or had a puncture or something. Piastri could still win. Lando could have a spin or something, and then he still wins, right? Piastri would not want to yield before lap 58, just in the odd scenario that something crazy happens. We've seen it before in Abu Dhabi at a championship decider. But let's say Max is literally coming up to the line, is about to win the race. Does Piastri do the job? Because at that point, Piastri, he has the championship in his hands. He can no longer win, but he can decide who does at that moment. And if that was to be the case, then what would he do? Would he keep position and hypothetically give Max the championship? I think he would yield. I would be frankly shocked if he doesn't. What would intrigue me is, what if there was like a safety car so that Piastri was not able to yield? Like Norris was literally not able to overtake him because of the safety car rules. Would Piastri box? Would McLaren corner into the pits so that Lando passed him? Man, I don't know. As I say, I don't think it is going to be an uneventful weekend. It's also quickly worth saying before I forget, I don't think Oscar is going to do FP1 in Abu Dhabi. We've talked about this for some time, but he's still got to do 1 mandatory rookie session. So again, probably not ideal for his chances. His chances probably in hindsight ended with that decision in Qatar, which I'm sure is incredibly gut-wrenching. But Max's chances, well, they got even better. So very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care. And I'll see you next time.